Welcome to Infinite Library, where every story is a new mystery waiting to be solved. Grab a coffee, stay curious, and share the thrill with fellow mystery lovers. Chapter 1. The Wayfinder hummed with the familiar rhythm of hyperspace travel, a sound that Kae Teren had grown to associate with fragile moments of peace. The freighter wasn't much, a patchwork of outdated systems and hastily welded repairs, but it served its purpose. For Kae, it was less a ship and more a sanctuary, a place where she could fade into obscurity. A Jedi no longer. Just another wanderer in the outer rim. Davik's voice crackled over the comm, breaking her reverie. Kae, we've got some turbulence up here. You better come see this. The cockpit was a cramped utilitarian space, its consoles flickering with dim, overworked lights. Davik, the ship's owner and self-proclaimed expert smuggler, was hunched over the navigation controls, his wiry frame tense. Next to him, Mira, the ship's slicer and tech savant, frowned at a panel displaying the hyperspace route. "We're off course," Mira said, her voice sharp with irritation. "The nav computer's glitching. It dumped us out of hyperspace, mid-jump." "That's not possible," Kae said, leaning over her shoulder to inspect the screen. The swirling patterns of hyperspace had been replaced by the stark black void of real space, broken only by the ominous silhouette of a planet looming ahead. "Tell that to the computer," Mira shot back. "This planet wasn't on the charts. We shouldn't even be near a system." Davik scowled. "We don't have time for this. If we're late with the drop, our buyer's going to gut us." "Something's wrong," Kae said, her voice quieter now. She could feel it, a disturbance. In the Force, a chaotic pulse that made her skin crawl. It wasn't the first time she'd felt it, but here, in the shadow of this planet, it was overwhelming. "We shouldn't ignore this." Before Davik could respond, the ship's comm system came alive, emitting a repeating signal. It was faint, distorted but unmistakably a voice. "Do not disturb the legacy." Mira's fingers flew across the console. "It's an old dialect, galactic basic but ancient, pre-republic maybe." "That's not creepy at all," Davik muttered, his sarcasm failing to mask his unease. "Look, we just need to fix the nav computer and get out of here." Kae shook her head. "We can't. That signal, it's a warning, but it's also a call for help. A call for trouble, more like," Davik retorted. "You know what happens when people go poking around in uncharted systems? They don't come back." "Something brought us here," Kae insisted. "It wasn't the nav computer. It wasn't random. The Force—" "Don't start with that Jedi mumbo-jumbo," Davik snapped, cutting her off. "We're here because your Jedi past keeps dragging us into messes. I'm done risking my neck for your—" "She's right," Mira interrupted, surprising both of them. "There's something here. The signal's coming from the planet, and whatever's down there, it's ancient. Maybe valuable." Davik hesitated, his greed warring with his survival instincts. Finally he groaned. "Fine, but if this goes south, it's on you." The descent was anything but smooth. The Wayfinder shook violently as it entered the planet's atmosphere, battered by turbulent winds and erratic gravitational forces. The controls barely responded, and Davik's cursing filled the cockpit as he fought to keep the ship steady. "Hold on!" he shouted as the freighter broke through the cloud cover, revealing the planet's surface below. It was a wasteland of jagged cliffs and swirling storms, with flashes of lightning illuminating the ruins of a vast, ancient city sprawled across the landscape. The ship lurched as it hit the ground, skidding to a halt amidst a cluster of crumbling stone structures. Alarms blared, and the crew scrambled to assess the damage. "Well, the good news is we're alive," Mira said, unbuckling her harness. "The bad news is the ship's a mess. We're not getting off this rock anytime soon." Davik slammed his fist against the console. "Great! Just great! Now what?" Kae didn't answer. She was already stepping out of the cockpit, her senses attuned to the whispers of the Force. The planet's presence was overwhelming, a chaotic symphony of voices and memories that seemed to echo through time. Outside, the air was thick with an unnatural stillness, broken only by the occasional crack of thunder. The ruins loomed around them, their towering spires and weathered carvings a testament to a civilization long forgotten. "Do not disturb the legacy," the signal repeated, growing louder as they approached the ruins. "What does it mean?" Mira asked, her voice hushed. Kae shook her head. "I don't know, but I think we're about to find out." As the crew ventured into the ruins, The enormity of the ancient city became more apparent. The towering spires they had glimpsed from the cockpit were just the beginning. Beneath their feet, the ground sloped into a labyrinth of sprawling courtyards, broken pathways and vast, echoing halls carved into the bedrock itself. Lightning illuminated the carvings, etched into every surface, revealing scenes of battles, councils, and ceremonies, all depicting a species unknown to them. The air felt thick with history, like stepping into the pages of a forgotten chapter of the galaxy. "This place is massive," Mira murmured, her voice tinged with awe. She swept her scanner over one of the carvings, its glowing glyphs faintly pulsing. "And these readings, I've never seen energy signatures like this before." Davik tightened his grip on his blaster. "Energy signatures mean power sources. Power sources mean traps. Let's not get too comfortable." Kae moved ahead of them, her focus drawn to the faint pulse she could feel through the force. It was more than just a sense of unease. It was a rhythm, a heartbeat reverberating through the ruins. The carvings seemed alive, almost shifting when she looked at them out of the corner of her eye. "Do you feel that?" she asked, glancing back at Mira and Davik. "It's like the ruins are watching us." "I feel like this is a bad idea," Davik grumbled. "Same thing?" "No," Kae said. Her voice was distant, distracted. "It's not malevolent. It's curious." The signal grew stronger as they descended deeper into the ruins, its words repeating in a language that seemed to resonate in their bones. "Do not disturb the legacy." The repetition was unsettling, like an ancient warning that had endured millennia. At last, they reached a massive archway adorned with intricate symbols. The structure was so grand it seemed impossible that it had been built by mortal hands. Mira hesitated, her scanner beeping wildly. "There's something beyond this threshold. A chamber, maybe. And I don't think it's been opened in a very long time." "Good," Davik said. "Let's keep it that way." Kae ignored him, her hand brushing against the carvings as she stepped closer to the archway. The symbols glowed faintly under her touch, reacting as though recognizing her. She felt the rhythm intensify, the pulse aligning with her heartbeat. "Wait," Mira called out. "There's something you need to know." Before she could finish, the archway shuddered. With a low, resonating hum, the symbols flared to life, and the massive doors began to part. A rush of stale air burst forth, carrying with it the weight. "Half centuries." "Fantastic," Davik muttered, raising his blaster. "We're officially in the get-killed-by-ancient curses phase of this disaster." The chamber beyond was unlike anything they had seen. Vast and circular, it was lined with towering statues of robed figures, their faces obscured by ornate masks. In the center of the room stood a pedestal, atop which rested a crystalline artifact that pulsed faintly with light. "The signals. Source, this is it," Kae whispered. She approached the pedestal cautiously, the force surging around her. The artifact seemed to call to her, resonating with a frequency that matched the pulse she had felt since they arrived. "Don't touch it," Davik barked, his voice echoing through the chamber. "You have no idea what that thing is." "She's right, though," Mira said, her voice tight with nervous excitement. "That artifact, it's ancient, but it's connected to some kind of power grid, and it's tied to those energy readings I picked up earlier. It might be a control mechanism." "Or a weapon," Davik interrupted. "That's what it is, and if we're smart, we'll leave it alone." Kae hesitated, her hand hovering over the artifact. It was beautiful, an intricate lattice of crystalline structures that seemed to shimmer with their own light. But as she stared at it, she saw flashes in her mind, visions, a civilization rising to greatness, its leaders wielding immense power. And then, destruction, a collapse so complete it erased them from existence. She pulled her hand back, breathing heavily. "This artifact, and it's more than a weapon, it's a key." "A key to what?" Mira asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "To everything," Kae replied. "Their history, their knowledge, but also their downfall." Davik groaned. "Great. So now we're stuck on a planet with the galactic equivalent of a cursed diary. Let's pack it up and—" A deep rumble cut him off. The statues lining the chamber began to glow, their masked faces turning toward the crew. A voice boomed through the room, ancient and resonant, speaking in the same archaic dialect as the signal. But this time the words were clear, as though the ruins themselves were speaking directly to them. "You are not the inheritors. You are not prepared." The floor trembled, cracks spidering out from the pedestal. The artifact's light intensified, casting strange, shifting shadows on the walls. "Run!" Kae shouted, her voice breaking through the growing chaos. The crew sprinted back toward the entrance as the chamber began to collapse around them. The statues shattered, their glowing fragments filling the air like fireflies. Behind them, the pedestal erupted in a burst of light, sending a shockwave that hurled them into the corridor. When they finally scrambled back to the surface, gasping for breath, the ruins had fallen silent once more. The signal had stopped. "What just happened?" Mira asked, clutching her side where she'd been bruised by the blast. "They knew we were here," Kae said, her voice steady but grim. "And they judged us unworthy." The storm had subsided by the time they returned to the Wayfinder, but the tension in the air was heavier than ever. The ruins below had fallen silent, yet the memory of the voice lingered in their minds. Kae paced in the cockpit, her thoughts racing. The visions she had seen when she touched the artifact continued to flash before her. Images of a civilization that had once wielded unimaginable power, and the catastrophic downfall that followed. Davik dropped heavily into the co-pilot's chair, his blaster resting across his lap. "I'll say it again. We should have left when we had the chance. That place was a tomb and we woke it up." Mira ignored him, her attention focused on her datapad. "I recorded some of the glyphs before everything went haywire. They match fragments of a dead language I studied at the University of Coruscant. I think this civilization predates the Old Republic, maybe by tens of thousands of years." "Great. Ancient ghosts and homework," Davik grumbled. "That's exactly what we need right now." Kae stopped pacing and turned to face them. "This isn't just history. That artifact was alive in some way. It was connected to the Force, and those visions, they were a warning." "Yeah, I got the warning loud and clear," Davik shot back. "It said, 'Get out, or we'll bury you.'" "With the rest." Mira sighed, pushing her glasses higher up her nose. "It's not that simple. Whatever happened to that civilization, it's tied to that artifact, and maybe to the ruins themselves. If we can figure out how it works, we might understand what destroyed them, and maybe prevent it from happening." "Again, prevent what?" Davik asked, his voice rising. "We don't even know what it is. For all we know, we're playing with the same weapon that wiped them out." Kae held up a hand to stop the argument. "Enough, we can't leave yet. Not until we understand what we've found." Davik opened his mouth to protest, but Kae silenced him with a sharp look. "I know you're scared. So am I. But this is bigger than any of us. That artifact didn't just call to me. It's trying to tell us something, and we need to figure out what before it's too late." Reluctantly, Davik nodded, though the tension in his posture didn't ease. "Fine, but the second this starts going south, we're gone. No arguments." Kae nodded, her expression resolute. "Agreed." As they prepared for another excursion into the ruins, Mira continued analyzing her recordings, her excitement growing with each discovery. "There's something else," she said, her voice tinged with awe. "The signal, the one we picked up in orbit, it wasn't just a warning. It was a distress call." "From who?" Kae asked, frowning. Mira hesitated. "I don't know, but the signal is centuries old at least. Maybe even older. Whoever sent it, they were asking for help." "Or luring us into a trap," Davik muttered. "Maybe," Mira conceded. "But what if it wasn't? What if this civilization wasn't destroyed by its own hubris, but by something else? Something they couldn't stop?" Kae felt a chill run down her spine. The idea was terrifying, and yet it felt right. The visions she had seen hinted at an external force, a shadow that loomed over the civilization's final days. But what was it? And why did it feel like the artifact held the key to understanding it? The crew descended into the ruins once more, their steps cautious, their weapons at the ready. This time the atmosphere felt different. The pulse Kae had felt before was gone, replaced by an eerie stillness. The ruins seemed to hold their breath, as though waiting for something. They retraced their steps to the collapsed chamber, now filled with rubble and faintly glowing debris. Mira scanned the area, her brow furrowing. The energy readings are still here, but they're different, fainter. Maybe we broke it, Davik suggested, though he didn't sound hopeful. No, Mira said, shaking her head. It's more like it's shifted. The source isn't in this chamber anymore. Then where is it? Kae asked. Mira pointed to a narrow passageway on the far side of the chamber, partially obscured by fallen stones. There, it's leading deeper, underground. Davik groaned. Of course it is, because that's exactly where we want to go when things get creepy. Kae ignored him, her focus on the passageway. The force was faint, but she could still feel it, a thread of energy pulling her forward. Stay close, she said, stepping into the darkness. The passageway twisted and turned, its walls narrowing until they were forced to move single file. The air grew colder, the silence oppressive. Then, without warning, the corridor opened into a vast circular chamber that seemed to defy logic. The walls were lined with strange, crystalline structures that glowed faintly, casting shifting patterns of light across the floor. In the center of the room stood a massive floating construct, an orb of swirling energy that pulsed with a rhythm that felt both alien and familiar. Mira gasped, her scanner beeping wildly. This is it, the artifact. It wasn't the source, it was a conduit. This is the heart of the ruins. Kae stepped closer, the force thrumming around her. The orb seemed alive, its energy rippling like water. She could feel its power, its knowledge, and its danger. What is it? Davik asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't know, Kae admitted, but it's old. Older than anything I've ever felt before. The orb pulsed, and a voice echoed through the chamber, different from the one they had heard before. This one was softer, more mournful. You are not ready, it said, the words resonating in their minds. The legacy is not yours to bear. Before they could respond, the orb flared with light and the room began to shake. The crystalline structures hummed with energy, their glow intensifying. Not again, Davik groaned, raising his blaster. But this time the ruins didn't collapse. Instead, the light coalesced into a single point, forming a doorway of pure energy. On the other side, they could see stars, a view of the galaxy unlike anything they had ever seen. It's a gateway, Mira whispered, her voice filled with awe. To where? Kae asked, her heart pounding. The voice answered, its tone filled with both sorrow and resolve. To the truth. The gateway shimmered before them, its surface rippling like a pond disturbed by an unseen force. The stars on the other side seemed impossibly distant, yet strangely close, as if the galaxy itself awaited their step. Kae stood at the threshold, the weight of the moment pressing heavily on her shoulders. She could feel the force resonating with the portal, a quiet hum that seemed to echo in her very bones. Don't tell me we're actually thinking of going through that thing, Davik said, his voice tinged with disbelief. His blaster remained at the ready, though his hands betrayed a faint tremor. Kae glanced back at him, her expression unreadable. You've seen what's happening here, Davik. This isn't just about us anymore. That gateway might be the only way to understand what we're dealing with. Or it could kill us, Davik shot back. We've survived this long by not walking into glowing death traps. Mira adjusted her scanner, her gaze fixed on the readings flashing across the screen. The energy signatures are unlike anything I've ever seen, she murmured. This isn't just a gateway, it's a bridge. It's connecting this place to somewhere else. Somewhere we're not invited, Davik countered. That voice wasn't exactly rolling out the welcome mat. It said we're not ready, Kae interjected. Not that we shouldn't go. There's a difference. Davik threw up his hands. Great. Let's ignore the ominous warnings and jump straight into the void. What could possibly go wrong? Kae stepped closer to the portal, her resolve hardening. We came here for answers. This might be our only chance to find them. Mira hesitated, glancing between Kae and the gateway. I'll admit, it's a risk. But if what we've seen so far is any indication, there's something incredible on the other side. Something that might explain the ruins, the artifact, everything. Davik groaned, shaking his head. You're both insane, but I'm not staying here alone, so let's get this over with. Kae gave him a faint smile before turning back to the gateway. Taking a deep breath, she reached out, her fingers brushing the shimmering surface. The energy was warm, almost inviting, and she felt a strange pull as though the portal recognized her. Without another word, she stepped through, the light enveloping her. The sensation was unlike anything she had experienced before. It was as if the universe had momentarily folded around her, pressing her between the fabric of space and time before releasing her into the unknown. When the light faded, she found herself standing on a platform suspended in a vast, star-filled expanse. The others appeared beside her moments later, their expressions a mix of awe and apprehension. "Where are we?" Mira whispered, her voice barely audible. The platform seemed to stretch endlessly, its surface smooth and reflective, mirroring the stars above. Pillars of light rose into the sky at irregular intervals, their glow pulsating in a rhythm that felt almost alive. The air, or whatever passed for it, was still yet charged with an energy that made every breath feel electric. "This isn't a place," Kae said, her voice soft. "It's a construct, a nexus between realities." Mira knelt, running her hand across the platform's surface. "The material, it's not stone or metal, it's energy, solidified energy." "Fascinating," Davik muttered sarcastically. "Can we focus on how we're getting out of here?" Before anyone could respond, a figure emerged from the shadows. A being of light and shifting patterns, its form humanoid, yet unmistakably alien. It moved with an ethereal grace, its presence both calming and deeply unsettling. "You should not have come," the being said, its voice resonating in their minds. "The legacy is not yours to uncover." Kae stepped forward, her hand instinctively resting on her lightsaber hilt. "We're here because we need answers. The artifact, the ruins, what are they? What happened to the people who built them?" The being regarded her silently, its form flickering as though caught between dimensions. "The legacy you seek is a burden, not a gift. It was left behind as a warning, not an invitation." "A warning for what?" Mira asked, her curiosity overriding her fear. The being hesitated, as if weighing its words. "The creators of this place sought knowledge, beyond their understanding. They reached into the fabric of existence and found something they could not contain. The artifact you unearthed was their final act, a beacon to ward others away." "And what was it they found?" Kae pressed, her voice steady despite the unease gnawing at her. The being's form flickered again, and the stars around them seemed to dim. "They found the void, the emptiness between worlds where neither life nor death holds sway. They sought to harness its power, but it consumed them instead. Now their legacy remains, a reminder of the cost of arrogance." Kae felt a chill run down her spine. The visions she had seen, the destruction, the despair, it all made sense now. The civilization had reached too far, and the void had answered. "But the artifact," she said, "it's more than just a warning. It's connected to the Force, I can feel it." The being regarded her with something akin to sadness. "The artifact is a fragment of what was lost. It carries the echoes of their folly and the weight of their wisdom. But it is not meant for you." "Why not?" Kae demanded. "Why are we different?" "Because you do not yet understand the cost," the being replied. "To wield such knowledge is to invite the same fate. Humanity's strength lies not in what it can take, but in what it can endure." Davik stepped forward, his frustration boiling over. "If you're so worried about us making the same mistakes, then help us. Tell us how to stop it." The being turned to him, its gaze piercing. "You cannot stop it. The void is not a force to be fought, only endured. And even that comes at a price." Before they could respond, the platform began to tremble, and the pillars of light flared brighter. The being's form grew indistinct, its voice fading. "Your presence here has awakened the echoes. The void stirs once more. Leave now, or risk being consumed." The gateway reappeared behind them, its light flickering erratically. Kae hesitated, her heart torn. There was so much they didn't understand, so much they hadn't uncovered, but the being's warning was clear. "Let's go," she said, her voice firm. "We've learned enough for now." Reluctantly, they stepped back through the gateway, the light swallowing them whole. When they emerged, they were back in the ruins, the chamber silent once more. But something had changed. The air felt heavier, charged with a lingering sense of unease. Kae glanced at the artifact, still glowing faintly on the ground. She knew their journey was far from over. Whatever the void was, it wasn't just a threat to the ruins or the artifact. It was a threat to everything, and they were the only ones who knew. The ruins felt different now, quieter somehow, as though the very stones had drawn a collective breath. Kae stood in the center of the chamber, her eyes fixed on the artifact. Its once steady glow was now erratic, pulsing faintly in irregular intervals, as if mirroring the warning they'd just been given. "We shouldn't have come back here," Davik muttered, pacing near the entrance. "That thing said we woke something up. What if we just made everything worse?" "Running doesn't change what's already been set in motion," Kae replied without turning to face him. Her voice was calm, but her grip on her lightsaber hilt betrayed her tension. "We need to figure out what's happening before it spreads." Mira knelt beside the artifact, her scanner working furiously. She frowned at the readouts, her brow furrowing deeper with each passing moment. "The energy levels are spiking. Whatever resonance this artifact had before, it's amplifying. I don't think it's just reacting to us. It's broadcasting something." Kae's head snapped toward her. "Broadcasting? To where?" "Not where," Mira corrected, her tone grim. "To what? It's calling out." Davik froze mid-step, his hand tightening on his blaster. "Calling what, exactly? Because if it's anything like the void, I vote we destroy it right now." Kae shot him a warning glance. "Destroying it won't undo what's already been done. Besides, we don't even know if we can destroy it. Or if we should," Mira added. "If this is some kind of failsafe left by the creators, tampering with it could destabilize everything." "Everything's already unstable," Davik snapped, his frustration boiling over. "We've got glowing portals, cryptic warnings, and now an alien disco ball sending out distress signals. This isn't survival, it's suicide." Kae stood, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "Enough. Panicking won't help. We need to focus." She looked back at the artifact, her mind racing. The being said the artifact is a fragment of what was lost. If it's connected to the void, then maybe it's the key to understanding it. Mira hesitated. That might explain the energy output. But if the artifact is calling out to something in the void... She trailed off, her face pale. Kae nodded, understanding her unspoken fear. Then whatever's out there might be listening. The chamber suddenly felt colder, the shadows lengthening as if drawn by an unseen force. The ground beneath them trembled faintly, a low vibration that seemed to resonate from deep below. Davik raised his blaster, scanning the room. "Tell me that's not what I think it is." Mira's scanner beeped urgently, the display flashing red. "It's not just the artifact. The entire ruin is coming alive." Before anyone could respond, the walls began to shift, ancient mechanisms grinding to life after untold millennia. Symbols etched into the stone glowed faintly, their light spreading like veins through the structure. A deep, resonant hum filled, the air growing louder with each passing second. Kae reached out with the force, trying to sense the source of the disturbance. What she felt sent a chill down her spine, an overwhelming presence, vast and alien, stirring from its slumber. The echoes of the void, the being had called it, and now it was awake. "We need to move," Kae said, urgency creeping into her voice. "The artifact's connection to the void, it's activating something. We can't stay here." The team hurried out of the chamber, the vibrations intensifying with every step. The ruins themselves seemed to shift around them, the architecture bending and reforming as though the structure were alive. Pathways they'd traversed moments ago were gone, replaced by unfamiliar corridors that stretched into darkness. "This is impossible," Mira said, her voice trembling. "The ruins, they're rearranging themselves." "Not impossible," Kae said, her tone grim. "Deliberate. The creators built this place to protect the legacy. It's adapting to keep us here." Davik cursed under his breath. "Fantastic, a death maze, just what we needed." Kae led the way, her instincts guided by the Force. She could feel the energy of the artifact resonating throughout the ruins, a pulsing beacon that seemed to draw them deeper. The corridors grew narrower, the walls lined with symbols that glowed, brighter as they approached. Finally, they emerged into a vast chamber, unlike anything they'd seen before. The ceiling stretched high above them, disappearing into darkness, while the floor was etched with an intricate pattern of glowing lines that converged at a central pedestal. On the pedestal rested a second artifact, smaller than the first, but pulsing with the same chaotic energy. Mira's eyes widened. "There's more than one." Kae stepped closer, her gaze fixed on the new artifact. She could feel its power, its connection to the void. But this one felt different, more volatile, more dangerous. The force around it was turbulent, a swirling storm that threatened to consume anything that came too close. "This is what the first artifact was pointing to," Kae said. "It's part of the legacy." Davik eyed the artifact warily. "So what's the plan?" "Grab it, and hope it doesn't explode." "We can't just leave it here," Kae said. "If the void is stirring, this might be the only way to stop it. Or it might accelerate it," Mira countered. "We don't know enough about how these artifacts work. Interfering could make things worse." Kae hesitated, torn between caution and necessity. The memory of the being's warning echoed in her mind. The void is not a force to be fought, only endured. But enduring wasn't enough, not if it meant risking the galaxy. Suddenly, the chamber shook violently, the symbols on the walls flaring with blinding light. The hum of energy grew into a deafening roar, and the floor beneath them cracked, glowing fissures spreading outward from the pedestal. "Whatever we're doing, we need to do it now," Davik shouted. Kae reached for the artifact, her fingers brushing its surface. The moment she touched it, a surge of energy shot through her and her vision went white. She was no longer in the chamber, but standing in an infinite expanse of light and shadow. Around her she saw glimpses of the void, vast, endless, and consuming. A voice echoed in her mind, ancient and mournful. "You seek to wield what you cannot comprehend. The void is not yours to control." "I'm not trying to control it," Kae replied, her voice steady. "I'm trying to protect what's left." The presence seemed to consider her words before fading. When Kae's vision cleared, she was back in the chamber, the artifact glowing steadily in her hands. The turbulence in the force had subsided, replaced by a fragile stillness. The ruins began to settle, the vibrations ceasing as the glowing symbols dimmed. Kae turned to the others, her expression resolute. "We have what we need. Let's get out of here." As they made their way back to the ship, the weight of what they'd uncovered hung heavy in the air. The void was no longer just a distant threat. It was here, watching, waiting. And humanity's legacy would depend on what they did next. The Wayfinder tore through the atmosphere of Morvandis, its engines roaring as they propelled the freighter back into the relative safety of orbit. Inside the ship, the atmosphere was tense. The artifact sat on the table in the ship's central hold, its pulsating glow casting long, flickering shadows across the walls. No one spoke at first. The enormity of what they'd just experienced hung heavy in the air. Kae leaned against the bulkhead, her eyes fixed on the artifact. Her thoughts churned like a storm, trying to make sense of the vision she'd been shown. The void was vast, unknowable, and implacable, a force that defied comprehension. And yet the vision had made one thing clear. Humanity's place in the galaxy was no accident. The creators of the legacy had seen something in them, something that even now she couldn't fully grasp. So, what now? Davik broke the silence, his voice sharp with frustration. "We have this thing, and we're still no closer to figuring out what it does, or how to stop the void." "It's not just about stopping it," Kae replied, her voice distant. "It's about surviving it. The creators weren't trying to defeat the void. They were trying to endure it. That's what the artifacts are for." Mira frowned, pacing the length of the hold as she studied the readings on her datapad. If that's true, then why do the ruins warn against disturbing the legacy? What happens if we use these artifacts the wrong way? "They're tools," Kae said, finally, looking up. "And like any tool, their purpose depends on the user. The creators left them behind for a reason, but they also understood the risk of them falling into the wrong hands." Davik snorted. "Great. So we're playing with galaxy-shattering tech that even its makers were scared of. Comforting. Kae ignored his sarcasm and turned to Mira. What did you find out about the artifact we brought back? Mira hesitated, glancing at the glowing object. It's definitely linked to the first one, but its energy signature is different, stronger, more volatile. It's almost like it's designed to amplify the effects of the other artifact, or to act as a conduit for something larger. Larger? Davik's voice was tinged with unease. Like what? I don't know, Mira admitted, her frustration evident. The readings are too fragmented. It's like trying to map hyperspace without a Navy computer. But whatever it is, the two artifacts are part of a larger network. I'm certain of that. Kae straightened, a new determination in her eyes. Then we need to find the rest. If these artifacts are the key to enduring the void, we can't stop now. Davik threw up his hands. Are you serious? We barely made it out of that ruin alive, and you want to go treasure hunting for more of these things? Do you even hear yourself? We don't have a choice, Kae said, her voice firm. The void is waking up. If we don't act, it won't just be us who pay the price. It'll be every living thing in the galaxy. The weight of her words settled over the room, silencing further objections. Mira studied Kae for a moment before nodding. If we're going to do this, we need more information. The creators didn't just leave these artifacts scattered randomly. There has to be a pattern, a map. Kae's eyes narrowed in thought. The first artifact, the ruin said it was part of what was lost. Maybe the creators left clues to the locations of the others. Mira's fingers flew across her datapad, pulling up the scans they'd taken of the ruin's carvings. The symbols on the walls, they could be coordinates, or at least some kind of guide. Can you decode them? Kae asked. Not without a reference point, Mira admitted. But if we cross-reference them with known star charts, we might be able to narrow it down. Might doesn't inspire confidence, Davik muttered, but he didn't argue further. Kae pushed off the bulkhead and moved to stand beside Mira, her gaze steady. Do it. Whatever it takes, find where the next artifact is. As Mira worked, Kae felt a faint stirring in the force, a sense of movement in the vastness beyond the ship. Her brow furrowed and she reached out, trying to discern its source. What she felt sent a chill down her spine, an unfamiliar presence, cold and calculating, closing in on their position. We're not alone, she said quietly, her voice cutting through the silence. Davik immediately reached for his blaster. What do you mean, not alone? Who's out there? Kae closed her eyes, focusing on the disturbance. The presence was distant but growing stronger, a predator honing in on its prey. I don't know who they are, but they're coming. And they're looking for us. The ship's proximity alarms blared, confirming her fears. Mira glanced at the console, her expression grim. Two ships closing fast. They're not broadcasting any identification codes. Pirates? Davik guessed, already heading toward the gunner's station. Kae shook her head. No, something else. The Wayfinder's engines roared as the ship's systems went into high alert. Davik strapped into the turret, his hands flying over the controls as he prepared for a fight. Whoever they are, they picked the wrong ship to mess with. Kae moved to the cockpit, her hands steady on the controls. Mira followed, taking the co-pilot's seat. The approaching ships came into view on the sensors, sleek, angular designs that bristled with weaponry. They were unlike anything Kae had ever seen. These aren't standard models, Mira said, her voice tight. Their energy signatures are off the charts. Kae gritted her teeth. They're not here by coincidence. They knew we'd find the artifact. The enemy ships opened fire, bright streaks of plasma racing toward the Wayfinder. Kae pushed the freighter into a hard dive, the ship groaning in protest as it narrowly avoided the barrage. Davik returned fire, his turret spitting bolts of energy that forced the attackers to break formation. Hold them off as long as you can, Kae ordered. We need time to calculate a jump to hyperspace. Time we don't have, Davik shot back, his voice strained. These guys are fast. Kae's mind raced. The presence she'd felt was stronger now, almost suffocating. Whoever was commanding the enemy ships wasn't just after the artifact. They were connected to it. Somehow. She could feel their intent, cold and unrelenting. As the Wayfinder dodged another volley of plasma, Kae made a decision. Mira, get to the artifact. See if you can use its energy to disrupt their targeting systems. Mira hesitated. That could overload the ship's systems. We might not survive. We won't survive if we don't try, Kae said firmly. Mira nodded and rushed to the hold, leaving Kae and Davik to hold the line. The Wayfinder danced through the chaos, its shields flickering under the relentless assault. In the distance, the artifact's glow brightened, its energy spreading through the ship like wildfire. Kae gripped the controls, her focus unshakable. Hold on, this is going to get rough. As the artifact's energy reached its peak, a blinding pulse erupted from the ship, washing over the enemy vessels. For a moment, the void seemed to ripple, a silent scream echoing through the force. Then, just as quickly, the enemy ships vanished, their presence erased as though they had never been. The Wayfinder drifted in silence, its systems strained but intact. Kae exhaled slowly, her hands trembling on the controls. Everyone's still with me. Mira's voice crackled over the comm. Barely. Whatever that pulse was, it fried half our systems. Davik climbed out of the turret, his expression a mix of exhaustion and disbelief. What just happened? Where did they go? Kae stared into the void, her mind heavy with questions. I don't know, but we just sent a message to something far bigger than us, and I don't think they'll let us go so easily. The silence in the cockpit of the Wayfinder was almost deafening. The ship floated in orbit, its systems flickering sporadically as they struggled to recover from the artifact's pulse. Kae remained at the controls, staring out into the void, her mind racing to process what had just happened. The faint traces of the enemy ships had disappeared entirely, leaving behind an eerie emptiness. The void was still watching, though. She could feel it, a presence just out of reach. We can't stay here, Kae said, breaking the silence. Her voice was steady, but the undertone of urgency was unmistakable. No kidding, Davik muttered, as he entered the cockpit, his disheveled appearance reflecting the strain of the battle. I don't know what you just did, but I doubt those guys are gone for good. Whatever sent them is still out there. Kae nodded, but her thoughts were elsewhere. The artifact, its energy had saved them, but at what cost? She couldn't shake the feeling that their actions had triggered something far beyond their understanding. Mira, she called over the comm. Status report. Can the ship handle a jump to hyperspace? The line crackled before Mira's voice came through, tight with frustration. Barely. The artifact fried half our power relays. I've rerouted some systems, but if we try to jump, there's a good chance we'll overload the hyperdrive. Kae exhaled sharply. We don't have a choice. We're sitting ducks here. Where are we even going? Davik asked, dropping into the co-pilot seat. You said we need to find more artifacts, but we don't have a map, just some cryptic symbols and half-baked guesses. Kae turned. To him, her expression resolute. Mira's working on decoding the symbols. Until then, we need to put some distance between us and whoever just tried to kill us. Whoever they were, Davik muttered, leaning back in his seat. Not exactly the welcoming committee I'd hoped for. Kae keyed in a set of coordinates, the nearest star system with habitable planets. Prepare for hyperspace. Mira, keep an eye on the artifact's energy levels during the jump. If it reacts like it did before, we need to be ready. I'll do my best, Mira replied. No promises. The ship groaned as its engines roared back to life, their strained hum filling the cockpit. Kae pulled the hyperdrive lever, and the stars outside blurred into streaks of light as the freighter shot into hyperspace. For a brief moment, Kae allowed herself to relax. The immediate danger was behind them, but the tension in her chest remained. Something about the artifact's energy felt alive. It wasn't just a tool or a remnant of a forgotten civilization. It was a piece of something larger, something ancient and unrelenting. The transition into hyperspace had been rough, but the Wayfinder emerged intact in the orbit of a barren, rocky planet. The surface was jagged and uneven, marked by deep craters and fissures that glowed faintly with an eerie, otherworldly light. It was an inhospitable world, but one that had drawn Kae's attention through the Force. What is this place? Mira asked as she joined Kae and Davik in the cockpit, her eyes fixed on the planet below. I don't know, Kae admitted, her gaze distant. But there's something down there. I can feel it, Davik groaned. You know, every time you say, that things get worse for us. Kae ignored him and turned to Mira. Any signs of life? Mira scanned the readings on her datapad. None. The atmosphere's toxic, and the radiation levels are off the charts. Whatever's down there, it's not alive, not in any way we'd recognize. Great, Davik muttered. So now we're exploring a radioactive death trap. Fantastic. Kae stood, her decision made. We're going down, prepare the environmental suits. Davik threw up his hands. Of course we are. The descent to the planet's surface was turbulent, the atmosphere buffeting the freighter with relentless winds. When they finally touched down, the crew disembarked cautiously, their suits shielding them from the hostile environment. The air was thick with swirling dust, and the ground beneath their feet cracked and shifted with every step. Kae led the way, the artifact secured in a containment unit strapped to her back. It pulsed faintly, its glow barely visible through the swirling haze. As they moved deeper into the landscape, the fissures in the ground widened, revealing glimpses of a vast network of tunnels below. What is this place? Mira asked, her voice distorted by the suit's comm system. It's not natural, Kae replied, her eyes scanning the terrain. These fissures, they're too uniform, too precise. Someone, or something, made them. Let's hope they're not still here, Davik muttered, his blaster at the ready. As they approached one of the larger fissures, the artifact's glow intensified. Kae stopped, her breath catching as she felt a surge of energy through the force. It was the same sensation she'd felt on Morvandis, chaotic and overwhelming, but also deeply familiar. This is it, she said, kneeling at the edge of the fissure. This is where we need to go. You've got to be kidding me, Davik said, peering into the darkness below. That's a one-way trip to nowhere. Kae ignored him and unclipped a rappel line from her belt. Stay here if you're scared. Davik hesitated, his expression a mix of frustration and reluctance. Fine, but if we die down there, I'm blaming you. With that, the crew began their descent into the fissure, their lights cutting through the oppressive darkness. The walls of the tunnel were lined with strange crystalline formations that seemed to hum faintly as they passed. The deeper they went, the stronger the artifact's glow became, until it was the only source of light in the oppressive void. Finally, they emerged into a massive chamber. The ceiling arched high above them, and the walls were covered in intricate carvings that seemed to shift and change when viewed from different angles. At the center of the chamber stood a pedestal, and atop it rested another artifact, larger and more elaborate than the one they carried. Kae approached cautiously, her heart pounding. The energy emanating from the artifact was almost tangible, like a physical force pressing against her chest. As she reached out, the carvings on the walls began to glow, their shifting patterns resolving into a coherent image. It was a map. Mira gasped as she recognized the star systems depicted. These are the coordinates for the other artifacts. It's all here. Kae stared at the map, her mind racing. This was what they had been searching for, a guide to the legacy's full power. But as the chamber trembled and the artifact began to pulse erratically, she realized their discovery had not gone unnoticed. The air in the chamber grew heavy, an oppressive weight pressing down on the crew as the artifact's glow intensified. Kae stood frozen, her hand outstretched toward the map etched across the walls. The carvings shifted again, their symbols flickering like dying embers, as though the map itself were alive and struggling to stay coherent. This isn't good, Davik muttered, his eyes darting around the room. The ground beneath them began to tremble, subtle at first but growing in intensity. We need to leave now. Kae tore her gaze away from the glowing artifact and met his panicked eyes. We can't leave yet. This map, it's the key to everything. The other artifacts, the legacy, they're all connected. If we don't take this chance to learn more, we'll never survive what's coming. The chamber's tremors escalated into violent shakes, sending shards of crystalline debris crashing to the floor. Mira was at the pedestal now, her hands hovering over the artifact. If we take this, it could destabilize the entire structure. We don't even know how this place is holding together. Then we don't take it, Davik snapped. We take the map, memorize it, whatever, but we're not touching that thing. Kae's mind raced. The artifact on the pedestal called to her through the Force, its chaotic energy mingling with her own thoughts. She sensed its purpose, its link to the artifact they had already recovered. It wasn't just a key, it was a piece of a larger puzzle, and leaving it behind could mean abandoning their only chance of unraveling the mystery. "There's no time to debate this," she said, her voice firm. "We're taking it." "You've got a death wish," Davik muttered, shaking his head. "But fine, let's grab it and go before this place collapses on us." Kae approached the pedestal, her movements deliberate. She reached out, her fingers brushing the artifact's smooth surface. A jolt of energy surged through her, nearly sending her sprawling to the floor. The artifact's glow flared, filling the chamber with blinding light. The carvings on the walls dissolved, their intricate patterns unraveling like threads pulled from a tapestry. And then the tremors stopped. For a moment, everything was still. The oppressive weight lifted, leaving the air eerily quiet. Kae cradled the artifact in her hands, its surface warm and pulsing faintly with energy. She could feel its presence in the Force, chaotic and untamed, but also brimming with knowledge, waiting to be unlocked. "What just happened?" Mira asked, her voice trembling. Kae looked up at the now blank walls of the chamber. "I don't know," she admitted, "but we need to get out of here before it starts again." The crew hurried back to the fissure, their movements quick and deliberate. The climb back to the surface was grueling, the unstable ground shifting beneath their feet. Kae could feel the artifact's energy coursing through her, its chaotic nature resonating with the Force in ways she didn't fully understand. It was as though it had a will of its own, pulling her thoughts in directions she couldn't quite follow. When they finally emerged into the toxic air of the planet's surface, the sight that greeted them made Kae's stomach drop. The Wayfinder, their only means of escape, was surrounded by a fleet of ships. These vessels were sleek and angular, their design unmistakably alien. Their hulls shimmered with an iridescent sheen, reflecting the planet's faint, eerie glow. "We've got company," Davik said, his tone grim. Mira cursed under her breath. "They must have tracked us here. The energy pulses. We practically broadcasted our location." Kae's grip on the artifact tightened. "Get to the ship now." The crew sprinted toward the Wayfinder, the artifact's pulse quickening with each step. The alien ships didn't fire, but their presence alone was enough to set Kae on edge. She could feel their occupants through the Force, a collective consciousness cold and calculating, like a predator toying with its prey. As they reached the ramp of the freighter, a voice echoed through the air, transmitted directly into their minds. It was deep and resonant, laced with an unsettling calm. "You carry what does not belong to you. Return it, and you may leave unharmed." Kae froze, the artifact's energy pulsing in her hands. The voice wasn't just speaking to them, it was addressing her specifically. Through the Force, she could feel its intent. It wasn't a demand, it was a test. "We're not giving it back," she said aloud, her voice steady. "This artifact is part of something bigger, something your kind has kept hidden for too long. We're not walking away from this," the voice responded, its tone unchanging. "You misunderstand. It is not yours to wield, it never was." The ramp closed behind them as they boarded the ship, Davik rushing to the cockpit, while Mira began working on the artifact containment unit. Kae remained by the viewport, staring out at the alien fleet. The voice echoed again, this time quieter, almost mournful. "Your defiance will cost you everything." The alien ships moved in unison, forming a blockade around the Wayfinder. Kae could feel their intent through the Force. They weren't just here to retrieve the artifact. They were here to eliminate a threat. "Shields up," she called to Davik. "Get us out of here now." Davik didn't need to be told twice. The Wayfinder roared to life, its engine straining against the damage they'd sustained. The ship lifted off the ground, its shields flaring as the alien vessels opened fire. The first volley was absorbed, but the second hit harder, sending shockwaves through the freighter. "We can't take much more of this," Mira shouted from the back. "If they hit the containment unit, we're done for." Kae closed her eyes, reaching out through the Force. The artifact's chaotic energy surged within her, a tempest of possibilities. It wasn't just a key, it was a weapon. She could feel its potential, raw and unrestrained, waiting to be unleashed. "Hold," "Them off as long as you can," she said, her voice calm. "I'll handle the rest." Davik glanced over his shoulder. "What do you mean you'll handle it? What are you going to do?" Kae didn't answer. She made her way to the cargo hold, where the artifact pulsed in its containment unit. Placing her hands on its surface, she let the force guide her. The energy flowed through her, wild and uncontrollable, but she didn't resist. She let it consume her, trusting in its chaotic nature. The artifact flared to life, its light piercing through the walls of the ship. Outside, the alien vessels faltered, their movements becoming erratic. Through the force, Kae could feel their collective consciousness unraveling, their calculated precision giving way to chaos, as the Wayfinder rocketed toward the outer atmosphere of Morvandis. Kae remained in the cargo hold, her connection to the artifact growing deeper with every passing moment. The chaotic energy emanating from the device flowed through her like a tempest, pushing the boundaries of her understanding. It was not simply power, it was a torrent of fragmented will, 1,000 voices clamoring to be heard. She could feel the alien fleet's confusion ripple through the force. Their coordinated pursuit had faltered, the tight formation breaking, apart like scattered leaves in a storm. Yet the danger was far from over. The lead vessel, larger and more menacing than the others, surged forward, its weapons charging for another strike. "Kae!" Davik's voice crackled over the ship's intercom. "Whatever you're doing, it's working, but not enough. They're still on us and our shields won't last another hit." She didn't respond. Her focus was razor-sharp, her breathing slow and deliberate as she let the force guide her actions. The artifact pulsed violently, and for a fleeting moment, she saw beyond the present, a glimpse into something far greater than herself. Visions flooded her mind, a vast network of energy spanning galaxies, ancient and alive, its threads connecting everything and everyone. At its core was the same chaotic energy she now wielded, a force that defied control but thrived on creation and destruction in equal measure. She understood now why the artifact felt alive. It was a fragment of this network, a shard of the universe's untamed essence. But the vision was fleeting, slipping away like sand through her fingers. When her senses returned to the present, the chaos within the artifact had grown, its energy thrumming with urgency. "Kae!" This time it was Mira. "We've got a breach in the rear section. If you're going to pull some Jedi miracle, now's the time." Kae clenched her fists, forcing herself to focus. The artifact's energy was unpredictable, a double-edged sword that could just as easily destroy as protect. She had to channel it, to shape its chaotic nature into something purposeful. She drew on the force, letting it flow through her in harmony with the artifact's power. The room around her blurred as she merged her will with the artifact's chaotic presence. A blinding surge of energy erupted from its core, expanding outward in waves that passed harmlessly through the ship, but struck the pursuing vessels with devastating precision. On the bridge of the lead alien vessel, the crew faltered, as their systems sparked and overloaded. The once cohesive collective mind that guided their fleet now felt fragmented, each individual consciousness struggling to maintain control. Their commander, a towering figure encased in shimmering armor, clenched their elongated hands as they addressed their faltering crew. "She has unlocked the fragment's will," the commander said, their voice resonating across the minds of their subordinates. "It seeks to protect its chosen wielder." One of the subordinates, their form hunched and flickering with faint bioluminescence, replied nervously, "The human is dangerous, more dangerous than we anticipated. Shall we withdraw?" "No," the commander replied, their tone steely with determination. "If she gains full control of the fragment, it will be the end of us, end of everything. We must stop her, whatever the cost." Back on the Wayfinder, Kae staggered as the energy backlash from the artifact subsided. Her connection to the Force felt frayed, as though she'd dipped into a well far deeper than she'd ever dared before. Yet the results were undeniable. Through the viewport, she could see the alien ships struggling to regain formation. Their movements were disorganized, their once unified coordination shattered. "We've got an opening," Davik shouted. "Hold on, I'm getting us out of here." The freighter roared as Davik pushed the engines to their limits, the ship lurching forward in a desperate bid to escape Morvandis' gravity well. Mira appeared in the cargo hold, her face pale but resolute. What the hell was that? She demanded. You nearly tore the ship apart. It worked, Kae said simply, her voice strained. She still cradled the artifact, its glow now dimmer but no less intense. We're still here, aren't we? Mira shook her head, her frustration evident. You're playing with forces you don't understand. This isn't just some Jedi relic, Kae. It's something else entirely. We don't even know what it wants. Kae looked down at the artifact, its surface faintly pulsing with chaotic energy. It doesn't want anything, she said softly. It's not alive, not in the way we understand. But it's part of something bigger, something ancient. Before Mira could respond, the ship shuddered violently. Through the viewport, the massive lead vessel loomed closer, its weapons glowing ominously. They're not giving up, Davik said over the intercom. Shields are barely holding and we're out of tricks. Kae's mind raced. They were outmatched and outgunned, their only advantage the artifact's unpredictable power. But using it again could destroy the ship, or worse. We're not done yet, she said, determination hardening her voice. Davik, keep us moving, I'll deal with them. She left the cargo hold, artifact in hand, and made her way to the ship's central chamber. Closing her eyes, she reached out through the force, her connection to the artifact deepening. Its energy surged, chaotic and untamed, but she embraced it this time, allowing it to meld with her will. The ship shuddered again, and Kae knew they were running out of time. Focusing every ounce of her strength, she projected the artifact's chaotic energy outward, letting it envelop the ship in a protective cocoon. The alien weapons fire struck the barrier, but dissipated harmlessly, their attacks thwarted by the artifact's raw power. Before anyone could respond, the ground trembled beneath their feet. A low hum filled the air, rising in pitch until it became a deafening roar. The walls shimmered and the floor split open, revealing a massive chamber below. The crew barely had time to react as they fell into the void. Kae landed hard, her lightsaber clattering from her hand. She groaned, pushing herself to her feet as she took in her surroundings. The chamber was enormous, its walls lined with towering statues that seemed to watch them with unblinking eyes. At the center of the room stood a massive pedestal, its surface inscribed with the same shifting symbols. The artifact in Kae's hands pulsed wildly, its energy resonating with the pedestal. What now? Mira asked, her voice trembling. Kae approached the pedestal cautiously, the artifact growing warmer in her grasp. It's calling to this, she said. This is what it's been leading us to. Davik looked around nervously. And what happens when you put it there? You don't know what this thing is capable of. I don't have a choice, Kae replied. If we're going to survive, we need to understand what we're dealing with. She placed the artifact on the pedestal. The room erupted with light as the symbols flared to life, their chaotic patterns coalescing into a coherent design. The energy in the room surged, and Kae felt a presence awaken, a consciousness vast and incomprehensible. The statues began to move, their forms shifting as though they were coming to life. The crew stood frozen, their weapons raised but useless, against the overwhelming power that filled the chamber. A voice echoed in their minds, deep and resonant, speaking in a language that transcended words. It was neither friendly nor hostile, but carried the weight of millennia. You have disturbed the legacy. Kae swallowed hard, her heart pounding in her chest. Who are you? She asked, her voice barely audible. We are the guardians of the rift, the custodians of the balance. You carry the fragment, the chaos that fuels creation and destruction. It is not yours to wield. Kae stepped forward, her fear giving way to determination. We didn't choose this. It found us. And now we're being hunted because of it. The voice paused as though considering her words. You are not the first to awaken the fragment, but you may be the last. The balance is fragile, and your kind walks the line between salvation and annihilation. Kae's mind raced, the weight of the revelation sinking in. The artifact was more than a relic. It was a force that could shape the galaxy. But at what cost? The air in the chamber grew heavier as the presence deepened its connection to the crew's minds. Images flooded Kae's consciousness, fragmented chaotic visions of ancient wars, collapsing stars, and civilizations consumed by the very power they sought to control. The artifact was no simple relic. It was a fragment of something far greater, a force capable of reshaping existence itself. The Guardian's voice pressed into her thoughts again, resonating like a drumbeat against her soul. You seek answers, but your kind has never been prepared to face them. The fragment tests all who touch it, revealing their nature. Will you be its salvation, or will it be your undoing? Kae's fingers tightened into fists, her resolve steeling despite the immense pressure bearing down on her. We didn't come here looking for power. We came here looking for survival. If there's a way to end this pursuit, to stop the war, above then we'll do it. The silence that followed was suffocating. Then a subtle shift in the room's energy became apparent. The statues lining the chamber began to move, not in aggression, but with purpose, as if following an ancient directive. They turned their heads toward the crew, their glowing eyes locking onto Kae. Mira stepped back instinctively, her hand hovering over her blaster. What are they doing? They're waiting, Kae said, her voice low. She could feel the artifact's energy aligning with the pedestal, creating a conduit between her and the Guardians. The connection was growing stronger, and with it came a deeper understanding of the artifact's nature. Davik, his weapon still raised, looked at Kae with disbelief. You can't seriously think we can trust this. They're talking about tests. Hand power like we're part of some grand experiment. This has trap written all over it. Kae turned to him, her eyes filled with a rare certainty. It's not about trust. It's about finding a way forward. If we don't do this, we'll never escape this planet, or the fleet waiting for us above. The chamber shifted again, the symbols along the walls glowing brighter as the floor beneath the pedestal began to descend. The crew barely managed to stay on their feet as the platform sank deeper into the structure, revealing another massive chamber below. This one was darker, more foreboding, its architecture seemingly alive, with pulsating energy. At the center of the room, a massive crystalline structure floated above a swirling vortex of light and shadow. The artifact pulsed in Kae's hands, its rhythm perfectly synchronized with the vortex. The connection between them was undeniable. This is it, Kae said softly, her gaze fixed on the vortex. The artifact, it's a conduit, a fragment of this. Mira stepped forward cautiously, her eyes narrowing as she studied the crystalline structure. And what exactly is this? Some kind of ancient engine? A weapon? It's neither, Kae replied, her voice distant as she let the Force guide her understanding. It's a source of creation and destruction, a singularity of potential. The Guardians called it the balance. It's what kept this planet alive and what destroyed it when the balance was broken. Davik snorted, his disbelief evident. So what? We're supposed to fix the balance and hope these ancient gods let us walk out of here alive. Before Kae could respond, the Guardian's voice returned, filling the chamber with a deafening presence. The balance has been fractured since the artifact was removed from this place. Restore it, and you will restore peace. Fail, and the chaos will consume you as it has countless others before. The statues encircling the chamber began to move again, their forms twisting and reshaping as they stepped down from their alcoves. They were no longer inert stone, but living constructs, their glowing forms radiating an immense energy that filled the room with an overwhelming sense of urgency. Mira's hand went to her blaster instinctively. Tell me they're not about to attack us. Kae shook her head. They're not, they're waiting. Davik frowned. For what? For us to act, Kae said. She stepped toward the crystalline structure, the artifact in her hands, trembling violently as she approached. The closer she got, the more she could feel its energy synchronizing with the vortex. It was as if the artifact was alive, responding to her intentions, her fears, and her resolve. The moment she reached the pedestal beneath the crystalline structure, the artifact's energy surged, enveloping her in a blinding light. She cried out as the Force flooded her senses, overwhelming her with visions of the past, of the Guardian's creation, of civilizations rising and falling, and of the delicate balance that held the galaxy together. And then she saw it. The truth. The artifact wasn't just a key, it was a catalyst, a fragment of pure potential capable of rewriting the fabric of reality. To use it was to risk everything, but to do nothing was to condemn them all. As the light subsided, Kae turned. To the crew, her expression resolute. "I know what we have to do." Davik raised an eyebrow. "Care to enlighten the rest of us?" "The artifact has to be returned to the balance," Kae explained. "But it's not that simple. The process will draw on our energy, our will. It's a test, not just of strength but of intent. If we fail, where the chaos will consume us." Mira crossed her arms, her gaze skeptical. "And if we succeed, then the balance will be restored," Kae said. "The Guardians will stand down and the artifact's power will no longer be a threat." Davik sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Great. No pressure." As Kae placed the artifact on the pedestal, the chamber erupted with energy. The vortex grew brighter, its swirling patterns accelerating as the artifact's energy merged with it. The crew could feel the pull, an invisible force drawing them into the process. The Guardian's voice returned, louder and more commanding than ever. "Prove your worth, restore the balance, or be undone by your hubris." The crew exchanged uneasy glances, but they knew there was no turning back. Together they stepped forward, their fates now tied to the artifact and the balance. The chamber erupted in blinding light, and the air was alive with a pulsating hum that resonated deep within the bones of everyone present. Kae could feel the artifact pulling at her very essence, demanding more than just her presence. It required her will, her resolve, her very soul. The Guardians' forms shimmered, their once stoic, statuesque figures now radiating a celestial energy as they encircled the crew. "Hold steady," Kae shouted, her voice barely cutting through the deafening roar of energy swirling around them. She extended her hands toward the pedestal, her connection to the force amplifying the artifact's power. The vortex above the crystalline structure twisted violently, its chaotic patterns slowly beginning to coalesce into something resembling order. Davik gritted his teeth, his knuckles white as he gripped his weapon. "Tell me this is part of the plan, Kae." "It's not about a plan," she yelled back, her voice strained. "It's about belief. We have to want it, to want balance, to want something more than just survival." Mira clenched her fists, stepping forward until she stood beside Kae. "Well then, let's make it happen." Her words were defiant, but there was an edge of fear in her tone. Despite her bravado, she could feel the immense weight of the moment, the sheer impossibility of what they were trying to achieve. The Guardians spoke in unison, their voices resonating with an otherworldly power. The balance recognizes intent. Unity strengthens its foundation. Chaos shatters it. Choose. The crew exchanged glances, a moment of shared understanding passing between them. Despite their differences, despite their conflicting motivations, they were in this together. If they failed, it wouldn't just mean their deaths. It would mean unleashing a force of chaos upon the galaxy. Kae closed her eyes, letting the force flow through her as she focused on the balance. She could feel it reaching out to her, testing her resolve. Her mind flooded with memories of loss, of failure, of moments where she doubted herself. But through it all, she held onto a singular truth. Humanity's strength was in its resilience, its ability to face the impossible and find a way through. The energy in the chamber shifted. The once chaotic vortex above the crystalline structure, now forming a perfect sphere of light. The artifact began to dissolve, its energy merging seamlessly with the balance. The Guardians stepped closer, their forms towering over the crew as they raised their glowing hands toward the sphere. "The balance is restored, but the cost remains. Will you bear it?" Kae's eyes snapped open, her gaze locking onto the Guardians. "What cost?" The Guardians' forms flickered, their energy waning as the chamber began to destabilize. "The artifact's energy has been spent, but the balance requires a stabilizing force. One must remain, a guardian, to ensure the balance endures." The crew froze, the weight of the words sinking in. Mira was the first to speak, her voice trembling. "You're saying one of us has to stay here forever?" Kae stepped forward, her expression calm despite the storm raging around them. "It has to be me." Davik grabbed her arm, his voice sharp. "Like hell it does. We came here together. We're leaving together. We'll figure something else out." "There isn't another way," Kae said softly, her eyes meeting his. "The balance demands intent, I brought us here. I connected with the artifact. This is my responsibility. Mira's eyes glistened, but she didn't argue. Deep down, she knew Kae was right. There's no talking you out of this, is there? Kae smiled faintly. Not a chance. As the crew prepared to leave, Kae stepped onto the pedestal, her form beginning to merge with the energy of the balance. The Guardian's voices filled the chamber one final time. Your sacrifice ensures the balance endures. Humanity's legacy is now intertwined with ours. Davik and Mira stood at the edge of the chamber, their expressions a mix of grief and determination. We'll make sure your story isn't forgotten, Mira said, her voice breaking slightly. Kae nodded, her form now almost completely enveloped by the balance. Take care of each other, and don't let the galaxy forget what humanity can. Do. The light around her intensified, forcing the crew to shield their eyes. When it subsided, Kae was gone, her presence now an integral part of the balance. The Guardians bowed their heads, their forms fading into the walls as the chamber fell silent. The Wayfinder ascended into the atmosphere of Morvandis, the once chaotic skies now calm and serene. Mira piloted the ship in silence, her hands steady despite the turmoil in her heart. Davik sat beside her, staring out at the stars with a faraway look in his eyes. She's really gone, he said after a long silence. She's not gone, Mira replied, her voice firm. She's part of something bigger now, and she made damn sure we had a future. As the Wayfinder jumped into hyperspace, leaving Morvandis behind, the galaxy seemed a little brighter. Kae's sacrifice had restored the balance, but her legacy would live on, not just in the crew, but in the story of humanity's defiance, its resilience, and its unyielding will to survive. For in the vast, uncharted depths of the cosmos, humanity had once again proven that it was not just a force to be reckoned with, but a force that could endure.